Today we're going to talk about how to use miniatures, mostly from Star Wars Legion, but not necessarily just that, to enhance your Fantasy Flight game, Star Wars role-playing game. Age of Rebellion, Edge of the Empire, and Force and Destiny. It's all the same game. So, like I said, you are going to get the most out of this video if you are planning on using Star Wars Legion to enhance your Fantasy Flight Games RPG Star Wars experience. But if you're just using, I don't know, minis from Imperial Assault, or just minis you got from wherever else, some other game, something, tokens, stones, beads, torn up pieces of paper, the beginner game, they got those tokens from there. A lot of stuff is going to be useful to anyone who wants to use physical stuff. Not just do theater of the mind, but physical stuff to help bring your Star Wars RPG to life. But, yeah, mostly we're going to be focusing on Legion. Now, I want to drive the point home that you should not by any means just go out and buy a bunch of Star Wars Legion stuff solely for the purpose of your RPG campaign. I mean, if you want to, if you got the money, disposable income, I ain't going to stop you. In fact, you should go on Amazon right now and go to my affiliate store and buy it there. I get some money from that. It doesn't really benefit you, but it helps the channel. Anyway, shameless plugs aside, this is really best for people who already have Star Wars Legion or already have the stuff around and they just want some extra ideas on how to do more with what they already got. That's mostly what this is for. Anyway, today we're going to focus mostly on the minions, the minion groups and other enemies, but mostly the minion groups. Mostly focusing on the stormtroopers because whatever campaign you run, odds are you're going to be killing lots and lots of stormtroopers. Okay, so in the FFG Star Wars RPG, you have three basic types of enemies. You got your nemesis, your rivals, rivals, and minion groups. Nemesises, they're close to what a player is in terms of ability and what they have. They're also typically big named characters, bad guys or allies or whatever. They're on the movie poster more often than not. Your rivals are more in the middle. They could just be some random stormtrooper sergeant or an imperial officer, lieutenant, or other equivalent in other organizations. A criminal level of a stormtrooper sergeant or that sort of thing. Maybe they have a name, maybe they don't, maybe they're just a slightly more powerful than a minion type of character. Minion groups, the one we're going to focus on the most today, they're really weak, they travel in groups, and they're in this game to bring to life the whole heroic main character powers aspect of a Star Wars game, in which your heroes plow through hordes of nameless, faceless foes. Typically, in this case, stormtroopers. Because it'd be annoying as a GM to micromanage all these stormtroopers you might have in an encounter or other minion equivalent, I'm just going to keep saying stormtrooper. Any nameless, faceless hordes of enemies that you get the idea. Stormtroopers. Okay, so it's a pain in the ass to micromanage each individual one. So they have minion group rules where minions will travel in groups of like individuals, stormtroopers or packs of Cath hounds or whatever else you got. They travel in small groups and they can move and act as one. Now, they're not important enough to have their own skill ranks. Instead, they have, their base characteristics. Of course, stormtroopers have, let's say, a 3 in agility, but they have no skill ranks in ranged heavy to shoot their E11 blaster rifles. Instead, they have what are called group skills. Certain skills that are group skills for them, and if it's group skills for them, like, say, ranged heavy to shoot their rifle with, stormtroopers get that as one of their group skills, well then, every stormtrooper in a minion group, beyond the first, basically counts as one skill rank. So if you have one stormtrooper just firing by himself, he has no stormtroopers beyond the first, so he is 0 ranks, essentially, to figure out his dice pool. He has that 3 in agility as his characteristic, so when he shoots with ranged heavy, he throws the 3 green dice. But if a second stormtrooper joins in, well then he has 1 trooper beyond the first within that minion group, so they fire together. 3 in agility, which gives us 3 green die, and then that 1 extra stormtrooper beyond the first counts as 1 skill rank, which means it upgrades one of those green die into a yellow. We have 1 yellow die and 2 green die. Those 2 stormtroopers attack as 1 with that dice pool. And this goes on, but it's easy to forget or screw up. In the moment, I've done this where I just have a brain fart and say, oh, 4 stormtroopers, okay, 4 skill ranks is part of the minion group. No, that's not how it works. 4 stormtroopers in a minion group, they're attacking, only 3 of those count as skill ranks. And sometimes in the moment, you're just trying to keep things moving along as a GM Don't fall asleep, don't look at Facebook, you're having fun, you're having fun. You want to have an easy way of distinguishing the first stormtrooper of a group from the rest of the stormtroopers. So at a glance you can say, oh, those are the 3 extra, those are the skill ranks. And you want that because, well, the group is going to shrink as things go on. Or you're going to go from group to group. This group took damage, they're missing some. This one started with an extra one that the others didn't because you had spare minis or whatever else. So in order to contend with this issue, I like to have physical representations of my troopers, but have one be distinctly different so that at a glance I can see that these 3 are different, therefore they're the 3 extras beyond the first. And that brings us to Star Wars Legion. Your standard soldiers, they come in sets of 7 minis right here. We got a set of 7 and a standalone expansion for the stormtroopers that's standard for all the other different types of soldiers. And also in the core game, there's 2 sets of 7 stormtroopers and also rebel troopers as well, plus standalone expansions for other different types of soldiers. Lots of variety here, but what I'm going to say is going to apply to all of those. Just focusing on stormtroopers for now, for simplicity's sake. In a set of 7, you have 1 leader stormtrooper, because the mechanics are kind of similar. You're led by a unit leader, so you move the unit leader around, and all the other regular stormtroopers, who look distinctly different, are just moved next to him. You measure the leader, you don't measure the other people, and then they attack as 1. So same basic principle in Star Wars Legion. So we can use that to our advantage. We take the leader mini, and every group of soldiers will have a leader mini. In this case, we have the Stormtrooper Sergeant, I believe, technically in the core book. Although, ignore that for now. We'll come back to that in a second. Shoulder Man. Pointy McShoulder Man. He is going to be our leader, our first Stormtrooper in our minion group, and any Stormtrooper who's near him, going to be part of that group, that don't look like him, all the regular troopers, they're going to be our skill rank. So it's very easy to look at a glance and see a group of Stormtroopers. There's Pointy McShoulder Pad, and then there's 3 other people. The 3 other people, those are our skill ranks. So at a glance, I can assemble my dice pool for that particular group of Stormtroopers very quickly and just roll it out there. Anything to make GMing and running the whole dice rolling for enemies quicker, more efficient, the better. Every little bit helps and can, of course, compound and scale upward when you have multiple stormtrooper groups. Now, if you're using this particular strategy, you do have something of a limitation with your soldiers, your troopers, depending on what expansions you have, whether or not you have the core game, etc. Basically, a set of 7, as I talked about, you're going to have 1 of these leader units, first stormtroopers, and then up to 4 extra troopers, the ones that will actually count as your skill ranks. But, to go back to the thing I said a second ago, the shoulder pad stormtrooper, that's a real thing in the core book, at least Edge of the Empire core book, probably Age, maybe some other places. Stormtrooper Sergeant, it's a real NPC, and they're pictured in the book with the shoulder pad and everything. They're slightly better. They are, I believe, a rival NPC, slightly better than a minion group. And, you might have an encounter with 1 or 2 Stormtrooper Sergeants and a couple of Stormtrooper Minion groups to help add some variety. Now, if that's the case, well then you would want the Stormtrooper Sergeant to be his own thing. I mean, the exact mini is exactly what it is in universe. I always love that. Any opportunity I can get where a mini looks exactly like it does in universe, and not, well, it kind of looks like this, but this is different, that's different, this is different. If you squint one eye and close to the other, it kind of looks like my character. You know what I mean? That kind of defeats the purpose of having a mini in an RPG. Anyway, Stormtrooper Sergeant, we have the exact mini right there. Maybe you want to use it. So that would mean that for your regular minion group, you just have, the regular Stormtrooper soldiers to work with? Well, there are a couple different approaches we can take with this. One would be to just differentiate the first leader, the first stormtrooper of the minion group from the others simply by distance. 1 stormtrooper, then a cluster of 3 or a cluster of 2 an inch away from him. And that could be the way in which you visually represent your minion groups. It still has the basic idea of being able to look at a glance, 3 soldiers not like the other, or 2 soldiers not like the other. Those are my skill rank soldiers. And another thing, if you want to have a really big battle, really want to show, not even a big battle, but just like a big throne room scene with the Emperor where there's just a huge amount of stormtroopers. Or like when he arrived in the shuttle and there's just a whole, just rows and rows of stormtrooper soldiers, and you really want to illustrate that. Or just a great big battle, just very large scale, and maybe you have a whole bunch of minion groups that really aren't going to affect your players, but you want to set the stage and make it seem bigger and grander, really drive the point home, this bigger battle. So you want to have all these minion groups visually represented on this big area. How many of these do I really want to buy? Well, one way would be to use a combination of minis and your beginner game tokens, or even just, cut out pieces of paper or beads or coins or whatever else you have, using a combination of those to represent a minion group of a particular type of enemy. And the mini shows you what it is, what type of enemy or NPC it is, and then the other tokens just represent additional members of that group beyond the first for the purposes of skill rank, while also illustrating there's a group of them here, not just one. And also, this allows us to have a leader while still freeing up the sergeants, to be rivals, to be that actual stat block in the Edge of the Empire core book. While also freeing up the minis we do have to be leaders of other minion groups. We're just maximizing the amount of minion groups we can have represented physically, which, just helps bring the campaign to life. And that could also work for the heavy troopers. Let's talk about the heavy troopers. Each set of 7 of these soldier minis that I talked about before, they will come with 2 different heavy troopers. They specialize in a particular heavy weapon. With the stormtroopers, we have, the DLT-19. Looks like a sniper rifle with a Ghostbuster backpack. I can talk. I'm almost positive I've seen this exact guy statted in the books. I don't know where. Somewhere you'll find this guy, and also we have the HH-12 Stormtrooper, Bazooka Joe. If you don't have the stat blocks, you can't find the stat blocks for these exact troopers, you don't really need to, of course. You could simply look at your GM screen and see there is a rocket launcher there. There is a numerous amount of high-powered energy rifles right there, the stat blocks, so simply take normal Stormtrooper, but also they have one of these high-powered weapons. Now you have a special Stormtrooper, and maybe you have a group of them, maybe it's a minion group of Stormtroopers with bazookas, rocket launchers, whatever. Now I've been talking mostly about the Stormtroopers and how to use them, but pretty much everything I've said can apply to the other types. We have the basic Rebel soldiers, and they, like the Stormtroopers, they have their own expansion pack, and also you can find that set of 7 times 2 in the core game, just like with the Stormtroopers. And because they're less uniform, or, they don't really have that iconic Stormtrooper armor or any equivalent, they kind of look more just like regular guys, like mercenaries. It's easier to, headcanon them as, gang members, just Hut enforcers. A Hut enforcer has a Gatling gun man as part of his entourage. Perhaps it's an Imperial campaign, then obviously everything I say is going to be switched in these videos, where the Rebels are your standard bread and butter enemies for the most part. We also have an expansion pack for a Snow Trooper set of 7 with their own special weapons. I think they got a flamethrower person in there. We also have Rebel Fleet Troopers. If you want to populate your command center, you have a talking encounter on the rebel ship or a base or whatever, and you have fleet officers all around, you just want to make it look more interesting, you can use those, or maybe just a unique NPC that you want to draw attention to. So unlike the others, they actually have a mini, and whereas the others, they just have tokens. If they're not good enough to get their name and face on the poster, they don't get a mini, they're just theater of the mind or whatever else. And we also have special forces units, soldiers, which, for our purposes, there aren't any different for the most part. They just won't have the exact same number necessarily. Like, Rebels have a special forces, Rebel Commandos, and the Imperials would be the Scout Troopers expansion. They're actually meant to bring to life 2 different units, a possible unit of 2 people, a special strike team with specialty weapons, explosives, or whatever, and then another group of 5-ish, 4 to 5-ish, depending. And so you'll see a variety of figures. We also have melee specialist expansions. On the Rebel side, you have Wookiees. If you want to put in Wookiees, there's a Wookiee expansion with up to 4 Wookiees. Chewbacca's standalone. If you want more Wookiees, more Wookiee NPCs, you can buy a couple of those. Again, not worth spending the money, but this is a luxury thing. Help enhance, going above and beyond the Call of Duty to help make the campaign more visually interesting. And on the Imperial side, you have Royal Guard, the actual Royal Guard. Plus, we have Rebel soldiers from Rogue One, that movie, and the Death Troopers are sort of their parallel. If you want just a wider variety of soldiers to put into your campaign, they're not available yet, but they will be. Anyway, all of these expansions fit in really well with that whole minion leader, minion group. All the strategy, all the stuff I've talked about today, all those expansions will fit in really well with that. And hopefully that was some help to you. That's it for today. If you like this video and want to see more, you can support the channel on Patreon. You can buy stuff on my Amazon store, or just come back later in the week. We're going to have lots of videos. I'm trying to make up for daily December time lost because, you know, I missed a couple of days. So we're going to put out as many videos as quickly as possible through January. Trying to make up for lost time. Then we'll go to more regular 2-3 a weekish schedule. Anyway, bye.